Hey, what's up?
We met a long, long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away in Tacoma U Symphony, and she was on this like violin god level, and I was just a measly peon. But at some point, our paths crossed more and more and more and more, and eventually we were playing together at Tacoma Musical Playhouse.
Oh my gosh, I almost
That
forgot about that.
is
Oh.
despite the drama, pun intended, of playing in a pit orchestra, is one of the funnest gigs you can take and not get paid very much, but still a very, very, very fun gig. And now you're in Texas, is that correct?
Yep, I'm currently based in Austin, Texas. So
And you're out there like totally crushing it. So tell us about what you do.
so I do a lot of different things. As so I've basically been full time freelance since I finished my artist diploma at the University of Texas, and
And was that with
that
is it Brian Lewis? Is that his name?
yes, I studied with Brian Lewis for 4 years, and he is
I teach his
such
pinky
a
rap on the daily.
oh yeah.
I know it's really a Suzuki rap, but he's got his own zesty twang on it that I
I
love.
know. He's such a wonderful human, and has been probably my biggest advocate. So I'm like so grateful for my time with him, and he still does so much for me to this day. Um, so since I left school, I have been doing a variety of things. One of the things that has sort of developed since I finished my AD was teaching. Is that that's something that's really has come to the forefront for me as something that I'm very passionate about and really enjoy doing. So I work for Austin Suzuki Music School. I teach a fantastic studio of kids, and we have like 70 kids in our program, something like that. I don't
Excellent.
work with all of them like on a regular basis, but I do teach them in groups, so I see them every couple of weeks, which is lovely. Um, and I've taught adjunct at Houston Tilton University when they have some string players there, which has been great too. I have a thriving private studio here as well. And outside of teaching, I do a fair bit of performing actually. So not so much orchestral these days. Um, I think that it's interesting because when I think back to like when we were in high school, I thought like, oh, I would love to play an orchestra one day. This is so fun. Don't get me wrong, I still love playing in an orchestra. I think the repertoire is so great, but it's not the end all for me.
Well, if you can remember back to right after you had graduated and I had started taking lessons with Sven, and he put the smack down on all of my laziness, and and I got to play the barber right after you left with you company. And the preparation just to do that kind of put me in this question of, is it even fun anymore to do this? Because of this, what we had put up on a pedestal of like what the peak of being a violin player was. And then like 2 summers later, I went and played in the house band at the Opry.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was like 1,000 times more fun.
Yeah.
10,000 times more stressful.
Yeah.
And you met some interesting characters. But there's more to this world than just classical playing.
Absolutely. And I think, as hard as it is to talk about this right now with the times that we are in, I think it's so interesting because, I mean, my mom, even to this day, is still like, don't you think, like, it'd be good for you to, like, start taking orchestra auditions? Like, that's, like, real stable. And
I mean, you could.
I mean, I could, and it's a totally different ball game preparing for an orchestra audition. There's a lot of rejection involved.
So different.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a lot of preparation. It's a lot of rejection, and it's actually a little bit of luck because you just never know how you're gonna play. And
exactly.
You never know how everyone else is gonna play on any given day. But I have friends in the Metropolitan Orchestra, like the opera orchestra, who are no longer with the job for the time being.
Yep.
My friends in San Antonio Symphony just were laid off. So it's, I think this thing that we've always put on as festival is like, that's the way you can go. This is how you've made it. And once you've done that, you don't have to worry about anything anymore. And it just kind of goes to show that there really is no safe path per se.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you talk about the element of luck in those in auditions for how much preparation that goes into them.
Right.
I stayed an extra year at PLU to get my choral certification just because choir was something that I also loved, and it was like 3 more classes, so why the heck not? And our mutual friend and my violin teacher, Sven Ronning, suggested maybe it's time we see other people. And so I started taking lessons with Betty Agent, who is just a phenomenal viola god.
Yeah.
And she sent me over to Joyce a couple of times, and Joyce is just like, I mean, she is the pinnacle of viola player. And I actually ended up getting a sub audition for Seattle. And when I got there were, I'm probably exaggerating in my memory, but at least 200 people in the room.
I'm not, I mean, no, I think that's actually 100% real.
For one sub spot.
Uh-huh.
And they wanted excerpts from Don Juan. They wanted, I mean, the Berlioz, the Roman Carnival one. Yeah, all the standards.
Right.
And you make it through the first round, and that's maybe calms you down a little bit, but you know there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
And then I show up to the second one, and there's a little folder next to my practice store that says, "We don't want Don Juan. We would now like Ein Heldenleben." And I'm a violin player. I don't know the viola part to Ein Heldenleben. Like, I barely know the violin part to Ein Heldenleben. And so I muster through it, and then they take the curtain away, and they give me a different copy with different bowings and fingerings.
Oh my gosh.
So at that point, I was like, if I do get in, this is going to be the most stressful sub job in my life. So
yeah.
The level of preparation just doesn't equal the reward a lot of the time. Well, now, definitely those people get paid enough when we are in session.
Right.
I mean, like, there was a 4th trumpet opening recently that was like 113 grand salary.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I think a lot of the Northwest orchestras are still getting paid at least partially.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
But it's very unique. They have a really strong union up here, and they're all on contract, not per service kind of.
Right, and I think that in general, my understanding and just like what I remember is that a lot of those arts organizations are probably a lot more financially stable than many of the other ones around the country.
Well, and say whatever you want about Gerard Schwartz. He knew how to set up a foundation that was like
100%.
sustainable.
He was, I think, I don't know. It's just, I know that maybe not everyone might be a fan of his conducting. I guess that's all personal.
I don't know if you were in that group, but we had him 2 years in a row in All-State and All-Northwest.
I don't think I actually was in that group when
Okay.
he conducted. So I never have really played under his baton, so I wouldn't be able to say anything about, but that.
He can run a rehearsal.
Yeah, he can run a rehearsal, and he also knew
and he knows how to get money.
Yeah, he knew how to run an organization to make sure that, the orchestra was going to stay afloat and continue providing wonderful
And that's
music.
not to belittle Ludovic Merlot, who is one of my, conducting idols.
Yeah.
And not just the way he waves a stick, but the way that he makes everybody both on and backstage feel like valuable.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you ever met, Mike, the stage guy back at Benaroya with the long hair and the chill attitude. I was just talking to him once because I'm concertmaster with this group, Ensign Symphony. It's sort of like Northwest Mormon Tabernacle kind of thing.
Awesome.
And so I got a lot of time backstage, and we're shooting the breeze. And he's saying, when Ludo came in, it was like, guys, I got your backs. I'm going to make sure that you can take care of your families, that you're never afraid to go to the doctor. And so that was, aside from any musical shifts, there was a shift in the whole organization that everybody was important.
Yeah.
And I've
always gotten that sense. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it seems like Thomas Dausgaard, the new guy in Seattle, I don't know anything about his business operations, but I know the orchestra is crushing it. They just won Deutsche Grammophon of the Year. They're recording of Nielsen Third Symphony, which is one of the hardest symphonies to put together. Was just stupendous.
Yeah.
But now I'm done with my rant talking about classical music and conducting. That stuff is really, as interesting as it is to me, it's very, very, very boring. So when you were just in college, and this was about the time that we were playing at TMP together, you started doing covers of different people's music.
I did.
Tell me about how that journey started.
I wanted to learn how to play something other than classical music. And it was really just because there was one of my friends had this band. He's like, I've always wanted to like have string players in the band. Like, and I was just like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I'm just so used to playing with, what's in front of me. Having stuff notated and having stuff written out and having very clear directions. So I was like very resistant for a while because I was like, no, I don't think. And my resistance was more just because I was like, I don't think I can do this well, and I don't like doing anything that I don't do well.
That was like my first 5 paid gigs at bars in Nashville. Like, just playing chords and hoping nobody heard me.
Yeah. It's like, is there a mute button right here for
Mute the fiddle player, please.
It's like, how convincingly can I airbow right now? But yeah, no, he kept it, like, every day he'd just be like, when are you gonna play? When are you gonna play? When are you gonna say, okay, fine, I'm gonna figure this out. And I just decided, I was like, okay, well, I gotta, I should at least start with the things that I know. So the stuff that I hear on the radio, that stuff I know, I should at least figure out how to do this stuff by ear. Because then when I really thought about it, I was like, you know what? Classical musicians are actually just cover artists.
Yeah.
That's like direction. What we are, yeah.
You just have way better directions.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, so like, I mean, like, it's all notated, but it's like, it's someone else's ideas.
Yeah.
It's right here. So
Absolutely.
It's like, okay. And it's just ultimately I'm reinterpreting it. It's like, okay, so I can do the same thing with pop music.
Yeah.
Or rock music or whatever it is. So I just was like, okay, well, how do I do this? How am I gonna record this? And so I was like, okay, I have GarageBand. I have no mic. I'm gonna do this with a garbage mic on and like use like the webcam, because it was just like that was the technology that I was working with at that time, and like figuring out, okay, how do I make this not sound like total and utter trash now? So like learning basic production. And it wasn't, and I think for me the biggest thing has always been, it's so important to be curious.
Yeah.
If you have a question, to never be afraid of hearing, no, I don't have the answer, or like, getting a no back or not being able to find an answer. So for me, it's always been like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep asking the same question until I find an answer. Doesn't even have to be the answer that I want to hear necessarily, but I need to know something definitively.
Well, and as my experience as a teacher trying to make this digital stuff work is, like, how can I record like multi-track performances and put them together? But a lot of people use the acapella app, or you can go into Logic Pro, whatever the heck,
right.
and you can put them together. But getting them to sync, they have to have been performed absolutely perfectly. And exactly. Nobody has the answer for how can I, or at least nobody I've talked to, how can I sync the ones that aren't perfectly synced yet? Or do I just have to record all of them perfectly?
Right.
So what I discovered myself is that people only know their small slice of pizza in the world.
Right.
So for like my brass friends who are recording Bach chorales on euphonium, they know how to do that. They figured out a way to do that. And if I was also trying to do that, they could be quite helpful. But when I'm trying to just record like a middle school string orchestra piece with all 5 parts, well, A, it's longer, and B, it's just a different animal altogether. And so I've had to have the tenacity to go in and figure out that I know these are my options for different DAWs, or digital artist workspace, for people who don't know that term, that can work for me. And I've gotten to the point where I just have to strip the audio altogether.
Right.
Because I can make the audio match, but I can't always make the video match. And that's the concession that I'm happy to make.
Right.
But to move this conversation to a more interesting point for students, not necessarily just the teachers out there trying to make a digital orchestra. And if I hear another Facebook post about, are you going to make a digital concert for our kids? I'm going to go barf in the garbage can. Because it's just not, though, it's not worth the effort. Let's just have a concert when we can. But tell me the trajectory from Grace Youn is making awesome covers of music in her college apartment that I was appreciating and passively liking on Facebook, to all of a sudden you're contacted by Katy Perry's people. Like, what? How do you get from A to B on that?
So my cover started actually getting some traction. Like, they were getting shared, and I think that was I think Reddit was around at that point. So I think someone found it.
Oh, Reddit is still a thing.
Yeah, I know it's still a thing, but I think it was a thing at that point too, in like 2011, 2012, and that's like when I started doing all this. It's still 2010
in my head, so.
So someone shared one of my videos, and then like the next morning I woke up to like 300,000 views on the video, and I was like, huh? Like, what happened? And
holy crap, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then that's when the subscribers started coming in, and I was creating content regularly. I bought like a better mic.
Is it a Rode?
No, I still have this mic actually, and I use it for teaching now via Zoom because the audio in it's all right. It's like just like a Blue Yeti mic. You could plug it in via USB.
Oh yeah, I know the mic.
Yeah, and it's like
a lot of the ASMR people use that one.
Yeah, you don't need like an interface or anything to like plug it in, and it's not complicated. So it's just like, okay, this is like a good starting point for me. And,
yeah.
A slightly like I bought a better camera so I could get better video, and then it was like, okay, well now I need like a better video editing software, and I was in college at the time, so like I could just go down to the library.
Yeah, there's tons of people to help you.
Yeah, the library, they had all the software, so I could use Final Cut Pro on the library's computer because I had access to it. So that's when I started cutting all this stuff together and learning how to do this. And it was really just starting from like square one. I mean, I have no idea how this works. I'm just gonna ask the internet or ask somebody until I get an answer. And it took asking a lot of different people for answers. Not one person, like you said earlier, has the answer to every single has a complete
they know the answers to their problem. They don't understand your problem.
Yeah, so you just have to keep asking until you get all the pieces of information that you need to attack your own problem.
And for people watching this that want to start producing this kind of content, iMovie will do like 80% of what you need Final Cut Pro to do.
Yes, it will.
It can do a lot. If you really want to get fancy and you want to start making like 2-set violin videos, maybe you need Final Cut Pro because they're getting pretty complicated. Right. And I know for sure that those two dudes are not doing it themselves. They are not smart enough to do all of that editing themselves. They've probably got some really intelligent sisters and or friends that are doing all of the cutting.
Right.
But you, just as an individual who loves music and wants to share it, iMovie will do just about everything you need it to do.
Exactly. So I started getting all this traction. I was like, okay, so that's cool. And I made that Katy Perry cover over winter break. I just had the time, and
just for fun. You weren't trying to get anywhere with it.
No, I wasn't. And like that was like, I mean, that's what it is to this day now in general. I'm not doing any of this for money, and the reason being, there's so much copyright stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want to get sued.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to, and it's like, I'm not really in it for the money anyway. It's something that brings me a lot of joy. If I end up getting some work from it, that's a bonus. But, and it's just because I knew plenty of people who were like getting their accounts shut down all the time because they were breaking copyright, like trying to make money off of it.
Well, just
using material that wasn't theirs that they hadn't gotten the proper licenses for.
Just the other day, I decided maybe it'd be cool to do a little like intro outro on these videos. And this is just me interviewing teachers or private teachers or people who can just inspire my kids. And I put, it's George Butterworth's In the Banks of Green Willow, like just a really pretty little classical song.
Uh-huh.
Literally 12 seconds, like right at the beginning, and it fades out. You can barely hear it. Demonetized.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, okay, fine, I'll take it out. Whatever. I'll find something else.
Right.
But I don't understand I do understand if you were straight up making a cover of somebody else's music and they were like not cool with that. But how soon and how quickly it can catch even the tiniest of something that is copyright.
Oh yeah, the
I'm
technology
sure you've
is
made
crazy.
videos that are legit and then
Yeah.
get demonetized because of one little note passage in this one spot that they thought was AC/DC, and you're doing a cover of, the Free Design or something from the
Right.
60s. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and I think that back then too, I think people were just using backing tracks too. So it's just that
Yeah.
they didn't receive the licenses for that. I think it's a totally different ballgame when you're actually creating the tracks from scratch by yourself.
Yes.
That you can make money off of.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
As long because you have to get the song licenses and everything. But if you are literally just trying to make money off a backing track that you paid for and then like the violin that you put on top of it, it's not going to work. Someone's going to come after you. So I never was just like, this is just a headache. I'm not interested in making money off. Like it's more trouble than it's worth. So
well, yeah. Who wants to spend 8 hours in Ableton to make a backing track for a video that's a minute and 30 seconds?
Right. It was just like, that's just, I mean, the videos already took long enough to cut together.
Yeah,
and edit.
absolutely.
So I was just like, I don't really want to put any more time into this just to make like a penny from, 3 million streams.
Yeah.
So
just the Katy Perry video in particular, how many hours did it take you to cut that video together?
That was probably about 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
Of recording audio that I liked, building that track, and getting everything to sync together. And video takes live, and
I think a lot of the parents and administrators and people not in music are expecting that we in academic or classical music just start doing what you've been doing for a long time now, because they've seen so much of that content, not understanding how much work it is. That's like almost a full-time job.
Yeah, that was 3 to 4 hours with a really fast computer. That had the software and the processing power to do it.
And you already knew how to do it. There was
exactly. Now, if you're starting from scratch and you have a terrible computer, it's going to take a really, really long time. It's going to be super frustrating.
Yeah.
And I really feel for all the educators out there right now who have had to transition to remote teaching in like an hour, essentially. They're like, okay, go. Good luck. Figure it out. And I know that's been like a big pain point. I know like there's something called there's like some sort of forum about distance learning on like Facebook, and I know that like it's like a lot of Suzuki teachers that are part of it, and like I see all the time that those people are really struggling figuring out how to make the lesson experience the same as it is in person.
Well, and that's the point. And maybe this is where people disagree with me, but it's not about making something as good as in person. It's what are our options? Because in person is not an option. Right. So how can we make the options we have as good as possible?
Right. And I had to explain that to all my families. I was just like, within my studio and the program that I teach in, I was the first to move to remote.
Yeah.
Our director was like, you guys can do whatever you want. Like, I think I'm probably going to do this after like spring break, maybe. I'm thinking about it. I was like, oh, I've already sent out the email. I told everybody I'm doing this now. Yep. Just because practicing like social and physical distancing is really important. And when you like, I have like 35, 40 kids in my studio. When you have that many people coming through your house all the time,
that's not safe.
No, it's not. And it's like, I'm like a slight germaphobe as is. So I'm already lysoling and cleaning on a regular basis. And then, you know, the thought of having all those people with like COVID-19 like going around too, and that being a big concern, it's just like, yeah, it's just not safe for anybody.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not even about my own personal health and safety anymore. It's about everybody else. So, and there were some families who were concerned. They're like, I'm like concerned that this experience is just not going to be, you know, the same. And I was like, you're right. And
Of
I
course,
can tell you
it's
right
not
now,
gonna
it
be
is
the same.
definitely not going to be the same.
But if you want your son or daughter to continue to progress,
exactly,
this is
we are going to make the best of this situation. I will provide support in any way that I can. If it means I have to make more practice videos, so be it. I will do it.
Yeah.
If you have questions, my number is available from 9
and
a.m. to
honestly,
8 p.m. Like
most of us wish that we were making more of those practice videos anyway. It's just that with all the in-class time, we don't have time to make those kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just like, you know, I told like all my family says like, you can text me between 9 and 8.
Yep.
I will do my best to get back to you in a reasonable amount of time. Anything after 8 p.m. though, don't expect a response from me.
That's fair.
But you know, and I tell them too, it's like, text me while you're practicing. If you have a question, and like my families do text me, they're like, hey, we're practicing this. So-and-so said it's this, but it doesn't sound right. And they'll send me a video and I'll be like, great, here's what it is. They're close, but here's like what we need to address. And then they can continue practicing and they feel like they're being supported. But yeah, no, it's been interesting because I feel like I've done some remote teaching already just out of necessity from when I travel. There is no other way. So, and especially because my kids are guaranteed a particular number of lessons for the school year. It's tuition based. So and with my travel schedule this year was really intense. I've been out of Austin maybe once or twice a month since July.
Really?
Yeah. And I was supposed to do some traveling at like last month in March, but like through about like January, February, I've been out of Austin once or twice a month.
Wow.
And when I see the majority of my kids over the weekend too, so it just makes it challenging trying to figure out, okay, how do we still have lessons?
Well, let's take a hard left turn here because I think we've maybe exhausted this conversation.
Sorry, we keep going.
It's something that's so fresh and that we're so passionate about, and it's hard to just.
We can go back to the Katy Perry thing because I do want to finish that.
That's not even where I was going to go.
Okay. I made that video. It started taking off, which is great. And then one day I get this email, and it's from like the Katy Perry documentary at gmail.com. And I was like, what the heck?
It was a hoax immediately?
Yeah, I was like, they're like, we found this video of yours and we think it'd be really great. Can we like talk to you sometime about like incorporating it? I was like, that ain't a thing. That's not a thing. This is a scam. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna Google it. And I started Googling and I like looked in the news and they're like, oh yeah, there's this documentary being like produced by Paramount Pictures and blah blah blah, it's set to come out, or like it's in production. So I was like, okay, I'll just write him back. And so I wrote him back and like, hey, just send me like, what do you need from me at this point? This sounds interesting. And they came back at me with a release form, and basically everything was like, okay, so you will use the video and then you no longer own any rights to it. We can use it however we want and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well,
I'm not signing
I don't like, it's like, I'm not making any money off this, but.
You could now.
Yeah, and it was, but it's just like, if I'm giving up my, like the thing, like the project that I spent hours on, you know, I think, you know, like, it was just like, well, now someone else owns it for free. That didn't feel right and didn't sit well with me. So I just kind of just was like, well, I'm going to have someone like look at this release form and maybe like, help me figure out what exactly they would get away with.
And by somebody, do you mean a family lawyer or a lawyer that specifies in this kind of things, or just?
I just called my sister, who's a lawyer.
Oh, okay, great.
And she asked around to a couple other people too. And so I was just like, this doesn't sound like a thing. So I just kind of ghosted. because I was like, I don't think this is anything I'm interested in, but then they kept emailing, and then the emails no longer came from the Katy Perry documentary at gmail.com. They started coming from like her label and from Paramount, and I was like,
yeah,
okay, this is interesting. And like one day I am like,
now.
and I'm like leaving class one day, like I'm leaving my music history class, and I get this phone call, and I look at the number, and it's like phone call from somewhere in LA, and I was like, okay, whatever. It's like, could be spam, but I just answered, and then they're like, is this Grace? And it's like, yeah. And they're like, okay, please hold for like the vice president of music at Paramount Pictures. I was like, say what now? So yeah, I had this conversation with her on the phone. She's like, look, this is like made the cut, every single cut of the film. They want to use it. This is what we'd be willing to pay you for like your image. Like, so like there'd be like a portion of like, me in the video, and for the music. Because they're like, it's been in the opening sequence in every single cut. And I was like, okay, well, send me a new agreement, I guess. So they sent a new contract, and I had like some people look it over, because I just was like, well, it's not like maybe I want to make money off of this one day.
Yeah.
Music anyway. So it's just like, if I want to keep the arrangement, then I don't want y'all to own it. So that was,
a point of contention.
Yeah, and so that was looked over, and there was a lot of back and forth, like with a couple edits here and there in the agreement. And then they're just like, well, like we'll pay you if it makes the cut, and then if it doesn't make the cut, you don't get paid. And it's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it ended up being in the film, so.
Well, that's just tremendous. I mean, of all the things that we in Tacoma Youth Symphony thought you would end up doing, I can't say that is what we expected.
That's like the last thing I thought was going to happen.
But I think with the versatility that I know you had, I was not at all surprised. Because I knew from playing in the musicals with you that it wasn't like that you didn't have to be doing classical music to be loving performance.
No, not at all. And I think that's what I discovered through this whole process was like, man, music is music.
And communicating to people through music.
Yeah. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be, Tchaikovsky, could be Lizzo, or whatever it is. But and
that's a steep drop off from Tchaikovsky to Lizzo, although she can't play flute, so mad props to Lizzo.
Oh yeah.
So here's the hard left turn. So you've done all this cool stuff. You're a highly respected violinist and now teacher. And I've got a bow buddy and some instruments, and I'm a 4th or 5th grade student, and I'm out of school until the fall. What are some really, really, really simple things that I can do so that when I come back to school, my teacher is gonna like blow their mind? How can I Suzuki my way to success?
I think the biggest thing is always maintaining fundamentals, and I know that people always ask me, it's like, how do I practice efficiently? How do I practice effectively? And the point that I always seem to be making every 24 hours on Instagram when I get this question is that practicing is a different ball game than playing through something.
Yes.
And one involves a lot of effort with hints of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, although this might sound a little bit harsh, is mindless.
Absolutely. I'm a big devotee of Burton Kaplan, if you know who he is.
Yeah.
And the conversation that we had, and now the mantra that I preach, is I don't care for how long or on what, but you must practice every day.
Yes, and it's really the consistency, because I know, and it's so funny because I know parents will just like, now that we're like in audition season again for like kids who are entering high school, middle school, whatever, or they're like, oh, well, I have to prepare for this audition. Can we get extra lessons? I was like, the extra lessons aren't going to help you.
You know, I was so used
And
to summer being audition season, and now that I'm a grown up and audition season is like Thanksgiving until New Year, it's really
right.
frustrating. Can we just have it all in the summer?
I know, right? I was like, I don't like that audition season is now year round. I'm not here for it.
Right.
um,
Well, and
but
I think kids get confused about what counts as practice as well. Because
right.
I know that at least when you were still taking lessons with Marsha Ott, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this, just a pinky push-up,
Mm-hmm.
that's practice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not you're practicing your Vitaly Chacon. That's different.
Right.
But you've done something today. So if you're a kid trapped in a long car ride once we're all out of this and your family has decided if we don't get out of this neck of the woods, we're going to kill each other, and you're
Right.
driving to Eastern Washington, you can still practice without your instrument in the car doing your pinky push-ups or setting up your bow hold on your bow buddy. And you can tell me if that looks wrong to you.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you very much. I had another question, but it has completely evaporated. If you have something else to say.
Oh, you're good. I think that it's really the consistency that matters. And
Yes.
I get a lot of people ask me on the daily on Instagram and families that I work with who are just like, practicing, it's really hard. So and so doesn't want to practice all the time. And it's like, hey, guess what? I, as a professional musician, do not want to practice every single day.
Well, what I tell the students and parents in the same situation is for people that, especially if it's a parent that is an avid athlete or somebody that works out, or
right.
I have a couple of parents here in town that attend or run like yoga kind of studios. Have you ever regretted a workout?
No, that's the same exact analogy I use.
Never regret practice.
Right. And it's just like there's always, it's like you have to get through the first 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's really once, and I tell them, it's like if you can endure the first 5 minutes, it will be okay.
Yep.
It's just starting any new task is always really, really hard and challenging. Mm-hmm. And even adults, like in the workplace, struggle with this. They don't always want to start a brand new project. So for us to have this like expectation of children, be like, you're going to start practicing and you're going to be happy as soon as you like unpack your case. It's unrealistic and it's really not fair.
Well, and back in 8th grade when I started taking lessons with Sven, and he said, I wake up every morning and I play all 12 scales. That's what I do every morning. And Sven, and that's something he would say, like, I wake up every morning and I play all 12 scales.
Yeah.
And I said, you're a crazy person. And he said, well, not really, but yes, but not really. Mm-hmm. Because then he shows you, have you seen his fingering chart? Mm-hmm. Where it's just the fingers?
Yeah.
He showed me that changed my world, because then I can just memorize 4 fingerings and I can do all 12 major and minor fingerings and arpeggios in maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I can wake up at 6:15 because I'm one of those weird people that wakes up early, and do that before I do anything else. And if I don't practice anything else the rest of the day, I know that like my basic maintenance, like the oil change and the tire
pressure. And I think that's the important thing in a time like this. And that's like what I actually focus on now as a professional, because my practice time is so limited. I don't have 4 to 5 hours a day anymore like I did in college.
Yep.
Realistically, if I'm lucky, I get like a miracle day is 2 hours. That's like a freaking miracle. But realistically, it's 30 minutes to an hour. And It's not a 30-minute, an hour block that's totally straight through. It's like you steal 5 minutes here, you steal 15 minutes here. Mm-hmm. And then it's all about maintenance. So I do a lot of technical work. I do a lot of long tones. I do bow exercises. I do left hand exercises. I play some scales. I play some etudes.
And I hope you can speak to this, but as I've gotten older and significantly better as a violinist, the left hand is not the problem.
Oh no, it's always this one. It's the bow hand.
It's really the right. And you talk to any professional, especially if you started younger, the left hand it really kind of knows where to put the note. And there's tricky things, of course.
Right.
If you're trying to do a scale in tenths, you're going to have to spend some time with that bad boy.
Right.
just getting the sound out of your instrument. If you don't have good bow control, you have nothing.
Exactly. So yeah, it's just like I do a lot of long tones. I do Suzuki tonalization. I play ringtones. That's actually the first
Do
few
you have
things I do.
a fiddle near you where you could show us some of those things?
Yeah, it's not my great fiddle, but it's a fiddle nonetheless.
I don't know what that one that you had was when we were playing in TMP, but that violin was like, oh my God.
That was I was very fortunate in that I had an instrument that was loaned to me during my undergrad, so I got to play on a really I don't know if that was the Italian instrument that I was playing on at that point. There was
I think it was a Mazzoni or something like that. Some
yeah, there was I was very lucky. It was a beautiful instrument.
Oh yeah, that violin was. It made me sound better.
So like I said, I do like a lot of long tones, and sometimes it's just like an open string, and it's like I hold the bow for like 10 seconds. And then, maybe I go to like 20 seconds and like I'm listening. And I'm eventually moving to like a 30-second bow. Sometimes if I'm feeling extra brave, I'll go for a 60-second bow.
Now,
But
are you trying to keep the bow into like a certain lane, like lane 5 right against the bridge, or is it just wherever makes the best tone?
Right. So that depends on how fast you're moving. So if you're like doing like a 5 or 10-second bow, you can actually be out towards the fingerboard.
Okay.
When you're doing a 60-second bow, the slow lane is actually by the bridge. So the slower you move, you actually have to move closer to the bridge. So I'm always experimenting with that contact point, and I'm always listening for the purity of the sound. So anytime I hear like a in the sound, I start over.
You've just pointed something out that so many school orchestra teachers are very confused about. Well, first thing, we can't agree on which one's lane 1 and which one's lane 5. Maybe.
Oh yeah, so you call this lane 5, I call this lane 1.
I think maybe it would be best if we got rid of the numbers and said slow lane, fast lane.
Yeah, that's actually how I often explain it to my kids. Is like, if you want to drive fast, you're going 80 miles an hour, you're out here in the fingerboard.
Or if you're doing, Mahler Adagietto, or, something more appropriate for high school students, you need to use lots of bow to get good tone,
right.
Which you're going to use a fast bow, and you can't do that anywhere near the bridge to get good tone and fast bow. So I like fast lane, slow lane. Can you show us fast lane, slow lane one more time?
Yeah, so fast lane out by the fingerboard, slow lane.
Yeah.
That's really by the bridge, and then in the middle, if you're going to go a medium pace, the middle's great.
And does fast lane also mean like soft?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay.
And it depends on, because I think you can play with the big sound out here. It can still sound full. It just depends on how much weight you use. Now, it's basic science. You can use more weight the closer you are to the bridge, because this is where the most tension is. This is the strongest point of the instrument. The further out towards the fingerboard you are, the less weight you can actually utilize.
Yep. Maybe I had one really detrimental masterclass with Ken Goldsmith where it was always play right next to the bridge. The audience will never hear the scratch. You have to fill up the whole hall. And so anything that wasn't that was, if it's at the fingerboard, it's soft. And so that's maybe something that I need to challenge in my own playing.
Right. And I think, you can, obviously it's easier to play softer out by the fingerboard.
And still
get a sound. Yeah, it's much more challenging to get a soft sound out here. But, I think it's always good to be able to push like the range of dynamics that you can get depending on the lane that you're in.
More about bow speed based on the bow placement. I like that. I can get married to that.
Yeah. So I do a lot of long tones. I do a lot of ringtones. Ringtones are really big in Suzuki education. A ringtone is going to be any fingered pitch that matches and shares the same letter as an open string. So like third finger on the A string.
Earlier podcast with, sorry to interrupt you. We did an earlier podcast with Lori Scott, and she has this ringtone escalator, and I got emails of, what the heck does she mean? Like Nokia ringtone? But I think it's that it's a finger exercise that starts on a note that you have an open string of. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So when you say ringtone, is that there is an open string on that note?
Well, okay, so
Help me out.
yeah, so I think the ringtones are always really confusing for a lot of people because I don't think they understand what exactly it means. It's any fingered note, so like third finger on the A string, for example, in first position. That's a D, right?
And
Shares
if
the
you
same letter
vibrate,
as
it
an
rings
open D.
open
So if
D.
you play it perfectly in tune, you're gonna get that open string to spin.
Yes. There we go.
And I don't know if you can hear this. My strings are kind of dead, but if I tap on that, if my note's perfectly in tune, and if I tap on that corresponding open string, you can sometimes hear a little bit of a ping.
Yes.
You stop the vibration, so that's like always a good way to sort of test whether or not your ringtones are in tune.
I hope that clears it up for the kids, but that cleared it up for me totally.
Cool. So yeah, I spend a lot of time playing ringtones. Sometimes it'll just be like top bottom together, or sometimes it's ringing fours.
Yeah.
Those are always the hardest ones to get really in tune. So I spend a lot of time doing that. The other thing that I spend a lot of time doing when I'm in a really good practice swing is something called one of the teacher trainers I worked with. She calls dots of sound. My kids sometimes call them poofs or puffs of sound.
I know puffs.
And it's essentially just little dots of sound that you're creating. And when we do this exercise, you're listening to make sure that you can actually hear the string continue to ring even after you finish it. So we're not stopping the vibration. So anytime you get that scratch, you start over. My little viola pod that I teach for group loves doing dots of sound. It's their favorite.
Is that what we've got, the 5-string?
Yeah. They love doing dots of sound. It's their favorite thing because it becomes a competition. They're like, okay, so like, can we do 80 dots of sound perfectly on an up bow and a down bow without any scratches in there? So they're like, and it becomes a competition for them, but then they're really attuned to like how well they're playing. And the rule is when you do make one of those nasty sort of scratch tones, you stop and you start over. Because and I think that's the thing that I'm always trying to instill in kids very, very early is the art of listening.
Yes.
Because your instrument and your bow are always providing you feedback. And I think that so much of teaching becomes kids being like, well, I'm just going to wait for an adult to tell me what's wrong. And then when they go to practice, they don't know how to address anything.
And right before the shutdown, I got an email from the people who manage Burton Kaplan's book. And I said, can I please copy all of the organizers in the back of his textbook? And it's like, yes, absolutely. So that you don't need an adult to tell you, like, out of 10 times, how many times did you have to stop in the middle of playing measures 2 and 3? You can keep track of that really easy yourself, and there's your teacher telling you how successful you were.
Exactly.
And so that kind of practice organization is not a replacement, well, not a good surrogate, but can be a replacement for people like you and me who would be there and give the immediate feedback.
Right. So, and getting kids to listen and really take the, so I'm all about listening, taking what we're hearing from our instrument and our bow, also what we see visually happening, and also connecting that to what we physically feel. Because I think that when we think about playing an instrument, we don't really think of it in terms of physicality.
Yeah.
We don't even necessarily think about what we see. We actually think about what we hear.
Yeah.
At best.
Oh, yeah.
And even then, I can't, like, sometimes it's just like I look at my kids and they're far, far away. They're making connections to none of those things.
So maybe at least one more thing that we could do, or that you could help us with. I have a lot of problems with kids that really struggle to use all of the circles that our body likes to make a really straight line with the bow on the string. Do you have tricks to make sure that the bow is totally perpendicular to the string?
Yeah. Here, let me grab my favorite teaching tool. I really don't like, I think in general, I'm really just not a fan of things like I don't know what it's actually like. Is it called like the
The
bow
barrier.
right? Yeah,
I
like the
hate
things
that.
that you like. It
That's
basically looks like violin headgear to
why.
me. Yeah, I don't think it actually fixes anything either.
It doesn't help your muscle because your muscle is still fighting against that barrier
Right.
rather than just being relaxed in the position it needs to be.
Right. So if I use tools, I like things that are very easily removable and that they also don't like interfere with anything.
But I prefer like reminders. Like I was
Yeah.
like Mimi Zweig talks about, and I've heard this also from, oh gosh, Monique Mead, who teaches at Carnegie Mellon.
Mm-hmm.
A little tiny sticker on the inside of the bow at halfway.
Right, something like that.
Yeah, you're
My
the only one
favorite.
who knows, and it's just right there
Yeah,
when you need it.
my favorite reminder is the little
Oh,
eraser. And so my kids oftentimes like when we're doing a lot of straight bow training, we use one of these like little animal erasers, and it actually just like lives. Let's see if I can balance this here so you can see. So it just lives right by the fingerboard. I don't know if you can see it here. So it's just here. And so, like when you work with like really, really young kids, it's just like, okay, Mr. Panda is listening to your tone.
High school kids like cute too.
Yeah, they do. And it's like my high schoolers use this too because it draws their attention to here. And then it's like they never want to knock the eraser off. So they're actually starting to actually tune into what's actually happening here.
Can we see what that looks like all together?
Yeah,
maybe
let me grab a different fiddle because I think this one is a little more sloped.
Okay. Let's see what happens when the panda gets knocked off. Poor little panda.
Let's see. This should work a little bit better. But I find that it's really just about 5 minutes of this. I never have to address it again. Or like, the kids will like take it back. They'll take it home with them. So the panda just like lives right there.
I love it.
And we're going, but you want to make sure that you're not going that way. Sometimes they have two if they're getting too close to the bridge, or you can always move. But yeah, it just lives right there, and it's just a gentle reminder. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm really living in the middle lane here.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I send one of these home with my kids for a week. They come back the next lesson. I never have to talk about it again.
That's brilliant. I love that.
And it's like you take it off; it doesn't damage the instrument or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as bow shapes go, what I had the realization this year because I had how many? I think I had started 18 new middle schoolers this year.
Wow.
In the fall, and just getting the different bow shapes, like the shapes of your bow arm.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you're at the frog, you have a slight, at least for me, you have a slight bump in your wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I think that was like hard for them to sort of visualize. And I drew it out and I was like, oh my God, this actually just looks like the square root sign. And then they're like, oh, I know what that is. And I was like, great, can you make your square root bow hold? And they do it all the time. I've never had to address it again. Every single middle schooler, they now start here. They're just like,
yep.
I made my square root sign, and then the tip of their bow is perfectly parallel to the bridge because they know that they have to start with that bump. Anytime that they're here, and then the tip goes behind their head. So I show them like, if you bump too much, you're going the opposite direction. If you don't bump, the tip of your bow hides behind your ear. So now we just want just enough of a bump there that you have like the perfect bow hand for the frog. And then they just transition to the tip. So that means that everything kind of caves in.
Yep.
But then they just move between those shapes.
I was there's a school orchestra teachers Facebook page. I don't know if you're on there, but they were saying, post something that you're practicing today. And so I was doing the Burton Kaplan rhythms on the Schumann scherzo.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens not at the frog, but pretty close. And you have to kind of have the bow bump
right
to do all the finger motion. And just the army of social justice string warriors were like, curved wrist, make sure your wrist is straight. And so I just commented real quick, Show me a picture of your hand at the frog.
Yeah.
To have the bump, unless you want to do the Heifetz wing, which
Right.
is terrible for your shoulder.
Yeah. And actually, just like all this playing that I've been doing with my twinkle
The
bow,
twinkle
that
bow!
has actually been fantastic for
I
doing
just ordered
this.
3 twinkle bows.
They're incredible. They actually sound good.
Yeah.
I think people that are like, it's not a real bow. It's like, no, it actually, like, people are like, you got that tone out of that thing? I'm like, yeah, like, it actually sounds pretty good. But I love it because it's so lightweight, especially, like, I feel like kids at this age now all have, like, really hypermobile joints.
Yes.
And so they lack a lot of strength. And the problem is a lot of beginning bows, like bows that are like priced for beginners or whatever, that come in your beginning rental kit or whatever, they are incredibly heavy.
Yes.
It's automatically setting up kids to fail.
No.
They can never get their joints to actually curl and hold a shape.
I don't care who I'm offending, but Coda bows need to change something. They are too heavy. It's like bowing with a gravel truck.
Really?
It's a gravel truck.
I guess maybe I just got a really nice Coda bow that wasn't too heavy.
But the cheaper ones that kids are buying.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That's what I'm talking, because I know little players that prefer Coda bows, and I don't have problems with those. But the bottom of the line ones that where kids think they're getting a bow that, you know, some fiddle player they know is on stage at the Opry, not the same bow.
Right.
And then the knockoffs, it's just like not carbon fiber, it's fiberglass.
Yeah.
And it's like solid.
Yeah.
So it's like
they're always incredibly heavy, and it just kills technique.
I mean, if you want to do drones on viola, that's the great bow to do it. But
for sure.
but
then what I realize is that, like, when kids have such a heavy bow, they have zero control over it, and then when they move to a lighter bow or a bow of better quality, their sound goes away because they actually weren't doing anything to actually create the sound themselves.
Now, when I was in Nashville, I wasn't just playing. I was getting an artist certificate at Vanderbilt at the Blair School. But in my spare time, I was doing luthier work with Peter Tatar, if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah.
He's made some somewhat expensive violas. And I asked him once, hey, Peter, can I make a twinkle bow with that bow that looks like crap? You know, I don't know what you're talking about. Do whatever you want. You pay for the hair. And so I figured out how long they were supposed to be, and I already had the frog. And then when I went home to PLU, we went through and did koye on every note in the presto from the first Bach sonata.
Oh my God.
It fixed so many problems. So could you, I'm very selfish, could you just show us what koye looks like with a twinkle bow?
Oh man, let's see if I can do this.
It's really hard.
It's so hard to get, like...
Can you do the circles with your fingers too? Where you circle and then reset? Yes.
And the circles are hard because what I find is that kids overextend.
Yes.
So the key to a good circle is actually keeping everything really round. It's just so we're always wanting to make sure that everything stays round. The moment you actually straighten, you lose any capability of actually going back.
Oh yeah. Now, I try to explain it like it's the, you know, when kitties do this.
Yeah.
It's more like just like a relaxing kitty paw than like a octopus hand when you are doing the circles. But that you can say a little bit about koye too, but for me, doing those koye exercises with the twinkle bow is the single most thing that has helped me with my bow control in any technique. Legato, leggero, détaché. The koye with little tiny bow fixed so much for me.
It's such an important bow stroke because it is the basis of a lot of other bow strokes.
And it's a really cool party trick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really what I've learned from quarantine is that everybody wants to watch me play with a twinkle bow. My follower account is up through the roof.
You playing Summer with the Twinkle Bow is like every third thing in my Facebook feed.
I know, it keeps coming up. Everyone's like, you keep coming up in my feed. I'm like, sorry. But like I think the previous week I didn't actually share it on Facebook, but it was on my Instagram. I had actually done spraying with so today I'm working on third movement of Sibelius. Because we're getting real brave here in quarantine.
How are you going to do the uppo staccatos?
That's
So you have to do a couple down before you can go up?
That's actually the bowing that I use anyway. I actually go down first and then up.
Have you seen the video of Vengerov recording the original version, and he does them all on an up bow?
Oh my god.
I hate that guy. Well, anyhow, this has been one of the most fun conversations I had in a long time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was so lovely just getting to catch up.
And I'm sure you're going to have lots of new likes and subs from my students. They think you're great.
Oh, that'll be fun. I appreciate it.
But before we close off, I have one question.
Absolutely.
I ask all of my guests, when you were little Grace, at whatever age you think little Grace is there something that you could go back and tell little Grace to either change your path or encourage you to survive some of the more difficult times in your life?
This actually brings I think when it was like 6th or 7th grade, it's like we had some sort of project that, it's like where you had to like pretend like you were like the person of the year. You had to like make your own magazine and like write an article about yourself, like as an adult, like what you had like accomplished. And I think I decided that I was gonna pretend to be like a concert violinist or something. Like that's what I envisioned for myself. And it's funny because my mom actually kept that project, one because she's kind of like a hoarder, like she hoards things a little bit, doesn't like really like letting
Your mother is also a brilliant chef.
Yes.
I would put your mother is like right up there with Mong Chi. Like her food is so good.
Oh god, I like miss the Korean food. It makes me like but she kept that project and she actually gave it to me right as I finished my undergrad. She's like, I don't remember that. Like, she's like, I don't know if you remember this, but you did this. And she's like, do you remember what you wrote in there? And I was like, no, I don't. And like, it was just like, oh, like, Grace has become like this like really important violinist. She does all these, she's collaborated with these artists. Here are the venues that she's performed at, outside of classical, she does X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah. And what was fascinating was I was like, you know what? I'm not too far off. I'm not too far off from what I said I was going to do, which is just like so funny to me because I was like,
it's almost like future Grace did go back in time and
yeah, I know. So I was just like, man, like I think that I don't know that I would actually change anything because what ultimately has become my life path, being a musician, everything, that wasn't necessarily what I thought I was going to do at age 12.
Yeah, absolutely.
At 12 I thought I was going to like go into like engineering or like I don't know. Be like a female CEO one day or something like that. I don't know.
Sherry Levens would get in daily arguments when I was still taking lessons with Sherry Levens in elementary school, that she was like, "You're going to be a violinist." I was like, "No, I want to be an industrial designer, Mrs. Levens." I go to Berkeley and be an industrial designer. And when we moved to Olympia, and then I get a phone call, "This is Sven Ronning. When would you like your first lesson?" So, that story is just fantastic. That you ended up exactly where little you thought you would.
Or like pretty close. And I was like, I mean, obviously, like there was still like, what was interesting was like, you know what, I came pretty close, and that still shows me that there is room for me to grow still.
Yep.
There are still things I can be achieving.
Now, Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I think that was it. I just was like, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Now, what if we have people out there who are young, aspiring Grace Yuns, but don't have the family that value arts?
You
What?
know, that actually was my family, though, in a lot of ways.
Okay.
My mom wanted, my mom put us all through instruments in the hopes that we would use music to like sort of serve our community, i.e., just like play in church, like as adults, that we would
Nothing
like
wrong with that.
that's like what she really wanted. So when I told my family that I actually wanted to do this for real and like have this be my life, that was devastating for them.
Really?
And it really, and through college they weren't really supportive.
Mm.
And it's probably like maybe as I was finishing college they were starting to come around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even for my dad it took longer for him to come
Mm-hmm. So to re-up the what could you go back and tell little Grace, what could you tell your younger self about um, how you could eventually come around and still create that bond with your parents that every child wants?
around. Oh man, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
um, I think what was, and you know, with now that like, and I think I had this realization really sort of in my early 20s too, was that like as I was going through this and I knew that like my parents were like very supportive. What I did have was a very supportive teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I did ultimately have people who were rooting for me and were essentially like family and my support group, which I'm so thankful for because there's no way I would have been able to get through it. I don't think I'd still be playing if I didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that one, there are always going to be people there
Yep.
for you when you are committed to your path, because I think people see it.
Yes.
And I've always been one to believe that the right people sort of come into your life at the right time.
Absolutely.
So the people who've been a part of my life, sort of supporting me through this journey, Maria Stampin, my mentor Blair Milton out at Northwestern University, Brian Lewis, all those
Brian
people.
Lewis is 100% cheerleader. I mean, as much of a pedagogue as he is, his full-time job is violin cheerleader.
Yes.
And I wish more teachers were like him. He's fantastic.
Yeah. But it took me showing them, it's like, okay, I'm serious about this. But
yeah, absolutely.
And but they saw what was sort of working against me. They're like, okay, I want to help this person.
Mm-hmm.
It is my job to help this person to make sure that they have what they need in order to make it. Which I'm so grateful for. So no, I think I wish I had known that sooner. Mm-hmm. Probably like at 17, 18, I wish that was abundantly clear to me that those people would come into my life, because it probably would have given me a little more hope, because it was a hard time applying for music school and starting college with that. But the second thing also being that my parents to this day still are. It's interesting because my parents are always asking me, are you still playing every day? Are you still practicing every day? Which I think is actually kind of wonderful, because it is their way of like sort of checking in and relating on some level. But also it's just like, life is too short to be holding any sort of grudges or holding on to any negative energy that doesn't really serve you. So for me, what I realized sort of in my early 20s as I was wrapping up college was like, my parents are getting old, they're getting up there. This might not be what they want me to do, but ultimately I know that they want me to be happy and to be well.
Yep, absolutely.
And so then there was a shift for me. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, I know that deep down that's actually what they want. They might not be ready to vocalize that yet, but that's deep down what they want. So how do we move forward in a positive way? How do we like coexist peacefully?
Everybody's story is unique, but I think it'd be fair to say that whatever your situation is, whatever your your cultural expectations are, is that every parent wants to see their child succeed, but their version of that may not look like what you are pursuing.
Right.
And on behalf of your collective musical cheerleaders, you're definitely doing that every day.
Oh, thanks.
And I, at least from the interactions, the few ones that I saw your parents interacting with you, it's clear that they care about you very much.
Oh, they do. They 100% do, and it's just like I think that that's like a thing with a lot of parents, and I see it now as a teacher now. It's just like we don't always know how to communicate that.
So I just hope for the kids watching this, who are like little Grace or little Nathan, that aren't sure how cool our families are going to be with our hopes and dreams as musicians, that they're at the very least you have your orchestra family, and at some point your parents are going to realize that what they want for you is success, and that if you go out in there and grab it, you can reconcile eventually.
Exactly, and its success looks like something different for everybody. I think that's the important thing to remember. And it could be playing in a professional orchestra full time. It could be having a successful studio. It could be being an orchestra director and inspiring, thousands of young musicians in a lifetime. It could be being on tour with a great act. It's whatever is most meaningful to you. And I think when that's abundantly clear and you live that way, and you show people that, like, wow, I am living my best life, people always come around.
Yep. Well, I think that's a perfect spot to end this conversation. I've got a couple more questions off camera, but thank you so much, Grace. I really appreciate it, and all of the stories that you shared with us and how candid you've been. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
All right, bye.